freight train rolling, bringing truth bombs down the line. Promoting the Southland 1 week at a time. Promoting the Southland 1 week at a time. SCV chat starts now.
Deleting that comment. Lies.
Bro, you were
I was combing my mustache.
you were digging for gold backstage. You were at least, like
I
that
had like
knuckle deep.
had that much in there.
Did not meet any obstructions, that's for sure.
Oh, it's good to be back. I guess
You missed me for the month that I was off.
I did, mainly because I hate producing the shows by myself.
Yeah, well, I got a fun one that I get to produce by myself for the most part tomorrow.
No. I since I joined late, I guess I'll tell everybody I'll dip out of this episode a bit early tonight, everyone. But that is so I can get some work done, so I can be there for some of tomorrow. I won't be there for all of it, but I will come in and out and stay there for a while, so poor GCB isn't just staring at the screen, wishing he had his Moose entertainment for the evening.
Oh no, it'll be fun. Now, of course, for those that have missed it, we have 2 pages that we operate over here. We have the SCV chat flagship page, and Moose, if you can go ahead and grab the URL to our other one, so you can put it in the chat. We also have our Stars of Bar Studios, which is the studio that produces this show.
For those who don't know,
yeah, for those that don't know, if you couldn't tell from the intro, we have a studio. We're running semi-professional on this one.
yes. Stars of Bar Studios LLC. Link in the chat.
Yeah, so go and click that link and make sure you're following our page, because tomorrow, if you've been living under a rock and did not know that tomorrow is election day, here we go, Moose. Go follow our page, because on that page and that page only, we will be doing an election breakdown as it comes in. We'll try not to get copyright strike, but we'll try to have like some of the professional commentators and pundits and stuff like that. But as it comes in, we'll do that stuff. In fact, we've been all day, it feels like, trying to swap brands, doing videos, or making our intro video, doing the background there. And even for states, and there are some states that we know for sure are going to go one way or the other.
Yeah.
But for the states that we don't, and even the states that we do, just for example, this is just an example. Boom, we've got that winner and that winner. We don't have a third party winner on there, but we've got multiple. We're ready to as it's called. And then as we can break down, and get more breakdown stuff, we'll be doing that. When I was in college, my primary major was political science with a minor in history. So I've been nerding out. But
you've kind of rubbed off on me. For those who don't know, and I don't normally promote SCV chat business is SCV chat business. Stars and Bars is Stars and Bars, but I do my own political podcast myself, and I've been getting involved in campaigns, and so I'm looking forward to tomorrow as well. Not only for the fact that we're hosting the first ever Stars and Bars Studios live stream tomorrow. We produced a couple things, namely this.
Yeah, well, that and it's we try to be respectful to the 501c3 operations on this end and not talk about any candidates or make it even so much remotely as a thought that we're trying to get political, except on issues on this channel. But on our other page, that is our page, we will be, Guy will be for sure. I don't know about Moose. We'll be giving my points of views on some things
I'll be
tomorrow.
lighting it up tomorrow. I'm probably gonna piss a couple of our viewers off, but I mean, you can disagree and continue to support everything. I hate that mentality. The people that get pissed and walk off.
Yeah. So definitely, tune in tomorrow on that channel. When after the show, go give our thing go give our other page a like. We will actually be going live at 6. I'll probably kick it off and bring Harrison in, or Harrison will hop in sometime around normal time-ish, but we will be going live at 6 Central Standard Time, or actually it's daylight savings time. Now, hope everybody remember to set their clocks back. I about had a heart attack. Yeah, I about had a heart attack this morning on my way into work as I'm like, this didn't daylight saves right on my car clock. So
what's a perk of living on the farm and a downside of living on the farm?
The cows?
Well, the cows, but I mean the cows are up. But one of the downsides is the fact that I sleep pretty hard, so my alarms are pretty loud. And my father had the dismay this morning of being woken up at 6 in the morning because I forgot to set my clock back. So instead of getting up at 7 like normal, I started getting ready for the day at 6, and kind of took me a while to figure out. So I'm sure he was very pleased that I woke him up an hour early for work.
Yeah. So yeah, I well, when I talked to him this morning on my way in, he seemed kind of pleased.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Maybe my alarm clock will still be there when I get home.
Yeah.
not outside.
It's either that or he changed the locks on you.
Well, I mean, either or, honestly. I'll agree with past commander in chief. Moose shenanigans are necessary to maintain
Moose what?
Shenanigans.
Here we go. Got it right that time. Then hooked on phonics lessons we got him for his birthday. Really paying off there, J-Bo.
And a lot of stuff goes into hosting, not just this show, but planning for tomorrow, and doing all the videos we do. I'll give GCB some credit because I know he'd do the same for me. Producing those 50-second videos y'all have been seeing takes a lot of time. GCB single-handedly today planned everything for tomorrow, and that's going to be a multi-hour show. So let us all just thank GCB because it's a lot of work at Stars and Bars for us to produce a lot of stuff, and poor GCB had to do it alone today because I didn't have Wi-Fi the majority of the day.
No, that AI and we'll get on topic here in a little bit, which this is probably going to be a multi-part episode. Just to let y'all know, the video that you'll see is the intro. I am a semi-perfectionist on recording voiceover audios. Like if I'm going to do a voiceover, I want it to be word perfect. I want it to be, flow and cadence right. So like I wrote one for Hank Williams Sr. back around, and the importance of Hank Williams Sr. back around July for National Reunion, and it's still sitting in my drafts just because. And the software that we use has a lovely AI voiceover feature that really saves time. So
I'm very happy because that is saving time on a secret project that I am mainly. This is the one I'm mainly doing. GCB has another one, but hopefully get to talk about them more in the future. Kind of just teasing y'all. Join the Patreon and you'll get a sneak peek even earlier.
Anyway, before we get this episode kicked off, I do want to
Still
bring
need to
up
do the
that
disclaimer.
yeah, the views and opinions expressed in this broadcast are not necessarily those of the SCV, its GEC, its executive director, nor any division, brigades, camps, or other subsidiaries. Strictly those of us who are expressing them. But before we get kicked off on the Abbeville video, I do want to share one that we want to put out that the Kennedy twins, I believe, wrote, and you can find it on our SCV chat YouTube page. Definitely share it out, guys, especially tomorrow.
The Sons of Confederate Veterans, America's oldest continuously operating veterans organization, encourages all Americans to perform their patriotic duty and vote in the upcoming election. Our republic depends upon your involvement. From the Sons of Confederate Veterans, be a patriot. Vote.
That took an uncomfortable amount of time to edit.
Yeah. The YouTube was playing another video in my ears right when we were doing that, and I was trying to get tonight's video pulled up. So anyway, tonight we are going to do a just because it's an hour and 20-minute video or 28-minute video, we're probably going to stop this about the halfway point. I have only seen 5 minutes of this video. I have not seen the entire thing, but this video is dealing with the Confederate Constitution, as done by the Abbeville Institute in a webinar they did a couple weeks ago that I wanted to attend, but again, I couldn't because we were right in the middle of my busy time of the year. But luckily, Abbeville has put it online for everybody to go and watch. So definitely go watch the full video. We're going to only cover a little bit of it. I do have my pocket Confederate Constitution. Actually, this was a really good, neat pamphlet that the UDC put out back in I believe the 60s or 70s. But it's kind of dated, but it's very, very cool. Would love for the SCV to do that as a little promotional item one of these days. So yeah, before we get kicked off, just because we want to be fair to everybody. Again, we do not own the content. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyrights Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Which this is scholarship and research for us. Fair use is as permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. No copyright infringement is intended. All rights belong to their respective owners. But again,
And of course, just to let y'all know, you can support the original video and the wonderful people that put it on at the Abbeville Institute. We love them. Thank y'all for all y'all do. Link is in the chat. And if you're watching on YouTube a bit later, I'll put the link in the description. Facebook doesn't let me edit the description, so tell Facebook.
Yeah, I had to set up the episode. Boost, did you freeze?
Yes, my Wi-Fi is hanging on by God's will.
Okay. Well, stop doing the thumbs up, and I won't be doing that. Anyway, without further ado, let's get kicked off. Share, and we actually see we have a premium YouTube premium up there in the corner, so we won't be interrupted by ads.
Oh, thank goodness.
Okay, welcome to our October 2024 Abbeville Institute Zoom webinar on the Confederate Constitution. We're very excited to have you here, and of course, we're excited to have both of our panelists. We're having a little AV problem, some technical issues with Don Livingston, but we do have Marshall DeRosa on with us. Unfortunately, he made it through the Hurricane Milton issue unscathed, though he was telling me before we got on here, they had a tornado right near his house. So it's great that Marshall made it through that okay. So a lot of damage in his neighborhood, but he has power. He's up and with us. So we're happy to have him here. If you don't know who Marshall is, I don't know why you wouldn't. I first came across his book on the Confederate Constitution of 1861 back in the late 90s. He wrote that book in 1991. It is the most important book ever written on the topic. I don't think that's a stretch to say. Nothing has ever been produced that's better or more comprehensive. And of course, he's also done a lot of work with not just the Confederate Constitution, but also the Confederate legal system. He's retired now, professor of political science at Florida Atlantic University, but he is now, I think he tells me, getting back in the workforce, unfortunately. But he has a servant's heart. He is a board member of the Abbeville Institute. He is a friend and someone who is just so good at what he does with the Confederate Constitution. So it's great to have him here. And I'm going to turn it over to him. And I think he's going to talk about a new book that he has coming out on this particular topic. And so it's going to be exciting to hear that. So, Marshall, I'm going to turn it on over to you.
Okay, thank you, Brian, and welcome to all the participants. Let's see, I want to share my screen, so let's see if that's going to work. Well, what I'd like to do, Brian, is talk about the Confederate Constitution, but in a particular manner, and to make it relevant more American political situation. So I'm just going to take a small slice of the Confederate Constitution and try to make a case why it was and is today still relevant. So I'm going to share my screen, and everybody should be familiar with this. If not, it might be shocking to you. But this will give us a good sort of window into where we are politically in the United States of America. And this is the debt clock, the US debt clock. So to give you an idea of what the Confederates were trying to mitigate against, and that was the expansion and growth of political power, which the other side of political power is economic power. So let's take a look at the United States insofar as its fiscal situation today. And that's what this debt clock helps us to do. And for those that might watch this months or a year from now, today is October the 11th, 2024. And all these numbers are going up, up, up. So this could be dated information within a year, 2 years,
It already
certainly
is.
5 years. So let's look into the left corner, the U.S. national debt. The U.S. national debt, if you look at the center of the screen, gives you a definition of what that is. The national public debt outstanding represents the face amount or principal amount of the marketable and non-marketable securities currently outstanding. So the state's government is close to 36 trillion, that's with a T, trillion dollars in debt. That comes to $105,000 per citizen, and the debt per taxpayer is close to $300,000. So if you look at those numbers, see that almost 2/3 of so-called Americans, citizens, are not going to be held responsible for this debt. It's only the taxpayers. And it's a minority of American citizens that actually pay taxes insofar as the federal income tax. If you continue to look down on that left corner, the US federal spending, the official is close to $7 trillion for this fiscal year. The actual is over $7 trillion because the US government cooks the numbers. That leaves us with a deficit, a spending deficit, a federal budget deficit of over $2 trillion. And if you could look at some of the other numbers quickly, take a look at them. We paid so far interest on the national debt over $5 trillion. The U.S. total debt is over $102 trillion. The interest paid on that debt, and that's $1 trillion. So these numbers, I'm not going to go over it. You can see student loan debt per student and so on. You could look at the total revenue the U.S. government's collecting. You could look at the, and that includes excise taxes, insofar as we can't see it because of the screen. Let me push this down. So in excise taxes, that's everybody pays, whether you pay federal income tax or not. If you purchase gasoline, for example. So the excise tax is $83 billion. But this just gives an idea that national, state, local, municipal is in debt up to its ears. But we're going to focus on the U.S. national debt and how that came about. And so far that we're supposed to have a limited government. But when we're talking about debt, that means all Americans to a certain extent are debtors, and we're held responsible for this one way or the other. And let me see if I could find that number. The total debt to GDP ratio, that's the gross domestic product, is close to 100%. So what I'm getting at is this is unsustainable. The U.S. government is in debt to such an extent that it can never be repaid. So that means there are creditors to this debt. This money is owed to somebody. And when they loan the U.S. government that money, whether in U.S. Treasury notes, bonds, whatever, they expected some type of return on their lending to the U.S. government, which isn't going to happen. So how did this happen? How did we get into a position where the Americans are in a position and the U.S. government of being in a financial crisis way beyond the capacity to ever meet the obligations of that crisis? And it's because of a flawed constitution, the U.S. Constitution. And this was an incremental process, but many during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, certain notable anti-federalists, expected something like this to happen. And as we went from the American Revolution to the ratification of the Constitution to the war between the states, things started to get exponentially more, let's say, critical insofar as being a government that's responsible and based upon the consent of the governed. Now, I'm going to get to the consent of the governed momentarily, because it might just be this is the type of government that the American people want. Because if I were to go back to that debt clock, consumer debt is at about the same rate as governmental debt. So in many ways, those horrible numbers that the financial crisis the U.S. government is in is a reflection of consumer debt and what the general population is in. We are a debtor nation. We are, in a certain sense, slaves to our creditors. So when you think about how this happened, I'm not going to go into the specifics and the details, but there are certain constitutional cases the U.S. Supreme Court adjudicated in the early quarter of the 19th century that gave a tremendous amount of power to the United States Congress through Article 1, Section 3, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, the commerce powers of the United States Congress. So the Congress was given power over the economy, essentially. Now remember, the U.S. Constitution was to limit governmental power, but also to empower the government to do certain things. but that became distorted as a result of the political process. So the Confederates, by 1861, this is something that had been percolating up, realized that the U.S. Congress was getting out of hand, primarily through tariffs, internal improvements, nothing compared to what we have today, but they could see that there was something wrong in the political process. It's what Bastiat refers to as plunder. Government was being used to plunder. The people that controlled the government were plundering those to their benefit and to the detriment of the people that had to pay the taxes and incur the financial responsibilities of this redistribution of financial power to the benefit of one group to the expense of the other. And the Southerners normally came out on the short end of that stick. But with that being said, my point is that we currently are in a financial crisis. And the financial crisis is that we are in debt that can never be repaid. There's depreciated the value of the dollar. And it is increasingly getting worse. So when we take a look at the Confederate Constitution, my point is that under the Confederate Constitution, this would not have happened. And I'm going to point out certain parts of the Confederate Constitution where the Confederates, the framers of the Confederate Constitution, made modifications to the U.S. Constitution because they were, in the words of John C. Calhoun, meeting danger on the frontier. They saw the trajectory of where the U.S. government was going. So secession and everything else aside, even if secession had never occurred, but you still have the constitutional crisis, and in 1860, 1861, there was an attempt to have a constitutional convention to modify the U.S. Constitution to prevent this type of derailment of what the framers had in mind, specifically the anti-federalists. This is some of the things that the U.S. Constitution today may have been incorporated by the Southern statesmen to prevent this financial crisis that we are in today. So when you think about the Confederate Constitution, it's not sort of an atavistic type of thing, thinking about the war and secession, even though those are extremely important. It's about the limits of governmental power and trying to limit its infringement upon the fundamental rights, especially the property rights of the people with whom they have jurisdiction over. So just think about this. And as you walk away from my presentation, one deliverable from me to you is this, that the Confederate framers were fighting for a just cause, and that's governmental tyranny, the tyranny over our property rights, not to mention our liberty and our life. Those are separate issues. We don't have time to go into them, but they're all, as Madison said, related. If the government can infringe upon your property rights, it won't be long before your liberty and even your life will be subject to their oppression. So Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 of the Confederate Constitution. It sounds very similar to the U.S. Constitution. It reads, the Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises for revenue necessary to pay the debts, provide for the common defense, and carry on the government of the Confederate States. Now here's where there's a modification. But no bounty shall be granted from the Treasury, nor shall any duties or taxes on importations from foreign nations be laid to promote or foster any branch of industry, and all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the Confederate States. So in other words, the Confederate Congress was denied the power to use its Article 1, Section 8 powers to impose bounties. What's a bounty? It's a form of plunder from the U.S. Treasury on imports. The next clause, to regulate commerce, and this is key because it relates to what I just read, to regulate commerce with foreign nations among the several states and with the Indian tribes. And here's the modification. But neither this nor any other clause contained in the Constitution shall ever be construed to delegate the power to Congress to appropriate money for any internal improvement intended to facilitate commerce. And then it gives some exceptions like lighthouses and things like that. But this addressed the concern of the Southerners because they were the victims of the Northern states' policies. The Congress could not use its power for internal improvements, subsidizing the building of canals, railroads, so on and so forth. And today that would include interstate highways. Think about that. Let me go down to another one, and there are many, I'm just reading a few. This is clause 7. The Congress has the power to establish post offices and post routes. Here's the modification. But the expenses of post office departments after the first day of March in the year of our Lord, 1863, shall be paid out of its own revenues. No subsidies for the Confederate post office after the first, by 1863. Now that might seem unimportant, but you could think about where we are today, the United States Post Office, how it's inefficient. But even going back to the first part of the 19th century, it's amazing how postmaster generals like Mr. Lincoln, that was one of the biggest patronage positions and a stepping stone to political prominence in early American history. And the Confederates said no more of this. The Confederate Post Office, and Lysander Spooner writes about this, he tried to start his own private post office, and the US government shut him down. This is in the early part of the mid-19th century. But think about it, that shows a commitment to accountability and efficiency that the Confederate States of America would have a privatized post office. Not only does that probably make more efficient the delivery of mail services, but it removes a tremendous amount of patronage in the Confederate political system. So post offices were, ripe for corruption, political patronage, and bureaucratic inefficiencies. The post office department was the means for the political party in power to reward its supporters through appointing postmasters and issuing transport contracts. Local postmasters, for example, could send and receive mail free of charge. They were also entitled to the delivery of newspapers free of charge. As the nation grew territorially and economically, riverboat, stagecoach, and railroad companies flexed their political muscle to secure contracts to transport the mail. The system became financially untenable and would collapse without the U.S. Congress subsidizing the inefficiencies. The Confederate States inherited this postal system and gave the Confederate Post Office, Postal Service 2 years to sink or swim. So when we talk about a post office in that period of American political development, it's not just the post office. Newspapers, stagecoaches, railroad companies, they were all intertwined in this corrupt process of plunder. And I could say more about that. There are many examples about newspapers and how postmasters would do certain things for editors and so forth, and the editors would promote their political careers, so on and so forth. But this is what was happening in early American history, not unlike what happens today, but on a much smaller scale. Going back to Article 1, Section 8. Congress shall appropriate no money from the Treasury except by a vote of 2/3 of both houses. Now think about this, if this was applicable to the Congress today. Taken by yeas and nays, unless it be asked and estimated for by some one of the heads of the department submitted to Congress by the president, or for the purpose of paying its own expenses and contingencies. So any money spent in the Confederate Congress that would come out of the Confederate Treasury had to be approved by a 2/3 vote of the House. Not a simple majority, a 2/3 vote, unless the request came from the office of the president. Then it could be a majority vote. But the president of the Confederacy served only one term, a 6-year one term. Once again, and this was prior to the Pendleton Act with the Civil Service, an attempt to remove the patronage, the corruption from the political process. This provision incentivized congressmen to collaborate with the president or the executive branch department heads to support their legislative proposals. Without executive branch support, their legislative proposals would require a 2/3 vote of the Congress for passage. And that's certainly much more difficult to get a 2/3 vote. Think about the omnibus bills that are passing through the Congress today. Thousands and thousands of pages. Riders put on, pork barrel project. Every one of those items would have to stand alone and be subjected to a 2/3 vote of the Congress unless it was requested for by the executive branch. Here's another provision. Now keep that debt clock in mind. You know, this tremendous financial crisis that we find ourselves in, not we, but the United States government, trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. Let me skip down because I want to keep it relatively brief. This is from Section 10. All bills appropriating money shall specify in federal currency the exact amount of each appropriation and for the purposes for which it is made. And Congress shall grant no compensation. Now think about this. This is the Confederate Congress shall grant no compensation to any public contract, officer, agent, or servant after such contract shall have been made or such service rendered. You signed a contract with the Confederate government, that's the contract. You can't come back and say, we didn't anticipate it's going to cost more. So once again, efficiency, accountability to the taxpayers of the Confederacy. Here's another one in Article 1, Section 8 of the Confederate Constitution. Every law or resolution having the force of law shall relate to but one subject, and that shall be expressed in the title. So as an American citizen, you could say, what's the title of that bill? Oh, this is what it's about. But every law and resolution, one topic, one subject, not packed into a multi-thousand-page omnibus bill that nobody ever reads except the lobbyists that incorporated or put the bill together. When I say nobody, I'm including the people in the Congress. So this provision ended the omnibus bill, through which legislatures would attach proposals to a bill, sometimes related and oftentimes unrelated. Let me give you an example. In 2021, President Trump signed the Omnibus Consolidated Appropriations Act. The act is over 2,000 pages long, appropriated $2.3 trillion in 12 separate appropriations. Congressional debate and oversight, for the most part, were negligible, if non-existent, with most of the act being the work of lobbyists and congressional staff. Now let's think about that. Let's go back to the post office, lobbyists and congressional staff. Who's getting the benefit here? Where's the representation of the people in their congressional districts? Unlike the Confederate president, President Trump did not have the option to line item veto provisions in the bill. Not to say that he would have. It's obvious that omnibus bills are cover for the wheeling and dealing the political class, avoiding the requisite accountability required by a system of governing based upon the informed consent of the governed. You can't be informed if you're trying to digest a 2,000-page bill spending over $2 trillion. Let's quickly shift to the executive branch of the Confederacy. Article 2, the executive power shall be vested in the President of the Confederate States of America. He and the Vice President shall hold their offices for the term of 6 years, but the President shall not be re-eligible. Now, a 6-year term limit for the President is in stark contrast to the U.S. Constitution's 4-year term, with unlimited re-election opportunities. Even though President Washington set the precedent of serving a maximum of two terms for a total of 8 years, primarily because he feared the election of the president would devolve into a lifetime appointment, it wasn't until 1951 that the U.S. president was limited to 2 terms. The Confederates did it in 1861. Political patronage, corruption is the mother's milk of presidential electoral success. Unlimited terms would provide the president with the opportunity to enhance executive power via the patronage system. The CSA constitutional 6-term limits did not eliminate political patronage, but it did mitigate it against morphing into an unyielding political force. You're always going to have political patronage. And but at least the Confederates realized that you need to put constraints on it and limits beyond what the U.S. Constitution at that time provided. There's another part of the Confederate president. The president may approve any appropriation and disapprove any other appropriation in the same bill. And in such case, he shall, in signing the bill, designate the appropriations disapproved and shall return a copy of such appropriations with his objections to the House in which the bill shall have originated. And the same proceeding shall then be had as in the case of other bills disapproved by the President. This provision provides the President with the power of the line item veto. something that conservatives have been trying to get into the U.S. Constitution for the last 20, 30 years, which substantially curtails the power of the Congress to hold the president captive to accept legislative manipulation. For example, if the Congress passes a funding bill that 10% of which the president disapproves, without the line item veto, he has to sign the bill and accept the 10%. So this is a double check in the Confederate Constitution. The Congress is limited, one subject per resolution law, 2/3 vote if it's not asked for or requested by either the president or department within the executive branch. And then on the other side of the Capitol, the president can limit the Congress, again, through the line item veto. So this is accountability. Now let's go back to the Trump bill, the appropriations bill for over $2 trillion. It was over 2,000 pages long. The Congress passed that late. The president had basically 10 days to either sign it or veto. It would be very difficult getting a bill in over 2,000 pages long and finding those parts of the bill that needed to be line item vetoed out. But this way, it would be one bill that goes to the president, nowhere near 2,000 pages. So each department would have to submit a bill, and the president in the Confederacy could line item veto out those provisions he thought unacceptable for whatever reason. Then the House or the Senate, wherever the bill originated, could override the president's veto with the 2/3 vote. Once again, an enhancement of the checks and balances. And there are more here. There's more I could talk about, but let me see. I know we want to hear from Professor Livingston. They also made provisions for the separation from the, it's not like they were walking away from their financial obligations once they established the Confederate States of America. They made provisions to make sure those financial obligations were met. They established a commission and so on. But the key here is going back to the screen. This debt clock. Just based upon the few provisions of the Confederate Constitution that I reviewed very quickly, this would be highly unlikely under a system, a political system constrained by the terms of the Confederate Constitution. And what does that mean for Americans? Or if the Confederacy were to be left alone and survived and prospered, it means more accountable government, more money in your pocket, the money that you earned, and more freedom. In other words, when you think about the Confederate Constitution, vis-a-vis the US Constitution, particularly where we are today. And when I say where we are today, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but think about globalism, COVID-19. Think about tax rates. Think about the intrusion, not only of the national government, but state and local, into the affairs that should be the domain of the family through the educational system. There are so many examples where government has become so intrusive in the lives of Americans and so overbearing that we almost don't even realize it because it's been incremental. We think that a little change here, a little change there, that we're going to be free. But that's why Emmy Bradford said, or made the claim, that conservatism is not the way to think about our current situation. because there's nothing left to conserve. We could slow the trend and buy ourselves a little bit of time. But what we have to think about is the reactionary imperative. If you really love your freedom and a limited government, you certainly don't want to conserve what we have now, what we had 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. We need a reactionary imperative to go back to the basics, to the extent that when we think about what it means to be an American, and Southerners were Americans, remember the Confederate States of America, they were more American, thinking about 1776, than their adversaries. What it means to be an American is to be free, with a certain level of government very much constrained and accountable to the governed, their informed consent. So one way, and this is why it's been demonized by those who take the opposite position, one way to initiate that reactionary imperative is not to go back to 1789 in the US Constitution, as grand an attempt as that was, but to return to 1861, where they saw the flaws in the US Constitution and made requisite changes to fix those flaws and to restore the freedom that comes not from government, but from the Creator. So that's why my focus on the Confederate Constitution is sort of laser beam, because they were there on the ground. They saw the trajectory of where the US was heading as early as 1861. It's hard for us to realize it because we think, man, it'd be great to return to the days of Reagan. Anybody who pays attention, the days of Reagan, he put the brakes on certain things, but the trend towards oppression continued. And you have to give the men of the South the credit they deserve, because they were willing to fight and die for the principles of 1776, that our rights come from the Creator, life, liberty, and property. But how do we operationalize those? U.S. Constitution, yes. The Confederate Constitution, a double yes, because it was a correction, an attempt to fix the flaws of the U.S. Constitution. And with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Ryan. So let me.
All right. Thank you, Marshall. Excellent as always. And do you have a new book coming out on the Confederate Constitution, or you're working on something with that? I know you're working on something with Confederate case law.
Yeah, thanks to the insightful comments of Professor Livingston, this has been a long-term project. So it started out as a more or less a book on Confederate case law.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and pause right there. That was a lot of information to digest, which, of course, we've talked about in a previous episode, how the framers of the Confederate Constitutions took the U.S. Constitution, tried to fix it, and what would have, what could have been. We will watch the second half with Dr. Livingston at a later date. It is 7:58, and we have a long evening planned for tomorrow night. So we are that was a good stopping point for us, but we'll pick that up probably in about 2 weeks, I would say.
Sounds awesome.
The 18th. So definitely go ahead and finish the rest of the lecture on your own. remember to go and give our Stars and Bars Studios page a like, because we will be doing our live stream of the U.S. election. And it just so happens to work that video was absolutely kind of perfect. Yeah, all that is really some interesting thinking material. But just as our final reminder to everybody, we know that several states have had early voting. If you have not voted, go out and vote. I'll be doing it tomorrow before I come into the office. So go vote, go vote, go vote. Vote for the candidate that you believe is best suited for your needs. And remember that the dead too have voices.
Yeah.
That's inside the War Memorial Building in Jackson. That's etched in or carved in the area in front of the stage. So just remember that. Remember your ancestors when you go vote tomorrow, because there are House elections, there are state elections, there are Senate elections. So just I hope you've done your research on your candidates and the ones that will identify with your ideology the most.
Please, reminder to go support the Abbeville Institute and all the great work they do at www.abbevilleinstitute.org. And of course, you can watch the lecture at the link provided in the chat. And of course, please remember to share this episode out and tune in for Commander's Comments this Thursday at 7 p.m. We'll have Commander-in-Chief Donnie Kennedy on, as well as Chief of Heritage Operations Paul Graham. So it's going to be a great episode. Looking forward to that. Make sure to share this episode out and tune in tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow we'll probably end up. Hopefully, there it's decided one way or the other by 10 o'clock tomorrow evening. But if it's not, we will go until from 6 until 10. So yeah.
Free bird.
Yeah, because I'm not wanting to be up, not wanting to be locked in this bunker till after 10 o'clock tomorrow night.
I was about to say, how long was it for the election results last term? It was like 2 in the morning or something like that.
No, it was like 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh yeah, yeah. We're not going to do it that long.
Hopefully that one way or the other it'll be. I know which way I want it to land.
Me
But hopefully it'll be early-ish night. But we will be on to discuss, bring up stuff and everything like that. So that'll be tomorrow night on the Stars and Bars Studios Facebook page. Moose has put it out there in the chat. You've mentioned Commander's Comments. Next week we've got Michael Hardy. He will be on for real. Last week when I announced that, I kind of have my weeks mixed up. So either we'll have Michael C. Hardy on next Monday, and if something happens, we'll finish up with the second half of the show. But if not, we'll do it in 2 weeks. So anyway, Moose, in the words of the late and great Harold Philpott, you know what you need to do?
What?
Don't Fumar in that elevator.
No Fumar in the elevator.
Rudder for up.
Thank our Patreon supporters. All
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Rudder for up.
Rare for up.
Drop it.
Am I okay? I didn't know if I was in the show, if you were in the show.
Drop it.
It's this button of the